Well, good evening, everybody. Happy November. Can you believe it is November? It snowed yesterday, for crying out loud. And Turkey Day is just around the corner. I'd like to welcome you to my monthly Fireside chat. This month we're a week early because the last Thursday of the month is Thanksgiving. And I thought I would kick things off today, as I usually do, with a little bit of a monologue on turkey. I've done this similar turkey talk a couple of times over the past years, but it never hurts to cover some vital information again quickly. Hello, Dan, I see you. Happy Thanksgiving. Regular visitor to these little conversations. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about cooking that turkey. You know, first I just want to get a little philosophical here, if I may. Thanksgiving is one of these fascinating holidays. And I don't know if there's anything quite like it around the world. It's centered around food. It's not a religious holiday. It's not a nationalist holiday. 4th of July is celebrating independence. This is a holiday that celebrates dependence, not independence. A holiday that says Thanksgiving for the harvest, the wonderful food. And what's fascinating about it is, all across the country, some of you may be cooking lasagna or prime rib. Most of us are cooking turkey. That strange, goofy bird that Ben Franklin wanted to make our national bird. And we're making stuffing from that most humble and noble ingredient, bread, with potatoes, the staple that kept many of our ancestors alive through famine, hard times, cranberries, sweet and sour like life itself, apple pie, the all-American dessert. And all across this country, we just had an election. We're divided, we're politically diverse, we're religiously diverse, a lot of acrimony. But all across this nation, on Thanksgiving, we sit down together and we have the same meal. All across, I don't know of any other country, any other place where that happens, where we share a meal together, regardless of politics, race, religion, gender, with family, friends, people we love, people we disagree with. And I just think that's marvelous. And I love the 4th of July and ribs and cookouts and everything. But this holiday, centered around food, centered around family and friends, centered around love, is really something extraordinary and special. And it's my favorite because of that. And it's especially my favorite because I get to cook. And also because I know a lot of you folks out there are cooking my recipes. Cooking with some of the tips and techniques I share. Hey, Darren, good to see you, buddy. Peter, Chris, welcome back. So, tonight I thought I'd kick things off just with some thoughts about turkey, because there's only a bazillion recipes for turkey on the internet. Really fun article by Sevenson in the New York Times this week on the history of turkey recipes and the way people have been cooking turkey over the years. Worth a read if you subscribe. But I think that there are some really good ideas and techniques that work regardless of how you're going to approach it. First of all, of course, it won't shock any of you to know that I prefer to cook it on the grill or the smoker. And there's a really good reason for that. It leaves more room in the oven for pie. And in the divisive world that we were just speaking of between pie and cake, I'm a pie guy. But if you cook it outdoors, as we both know, everything that you can cook indoors is better outdoors. And turkey takes to grilling and smoke really well. It loves smoke. Turkey and smoke go together like peanut butter and jelly. Now you got to be careful. You can easily overdo it. So don't go too heavy on the smoke. But I'm a big fan of cooking it on the grill or the smoker. And you know, if you hung around me or my website, you know, you can cook and you can smoke really well on a charcoal grill, a gas grill, or a smoker. You don't have to have a smoker to do smoking. And if you're not sure how, just go to AmazingRibs.com, and we have all kinds of tips and techniques on how to get your gas grill to do a good job of smoking, or a charcoal grill, and so on. But I now don't cook the Norman Rockwell bird anymore. I don't cook the whole bird. And for good reason. When you cook the whole bird, there's this cavity which air can't flow through. Now, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Let me scroll back just a notch here and put forth the idea that hopefully many of you understand. Don't stuff your bird. If you stuff the bird, you've turned it into a bowling ball. And the core concept you have to understand is the hot air, I should say, cooks the outside of the bird. But the hot air takes time to heat that outside of the bird. And then as the outside of the bird heats, it passes that heat down towards the center. Now, if the center is filled with stuffing, you have to cook that center of the stuffing to a safe temperature, because turkey juices are getting down into the stuffing. Now, it takes longer because it's now a bowling ball. It's a solid thermal mass. And it takes longer for the heat to get to the center of that stuffing. If you leave the stuffing out, warm air can get into the cavity. Now, it can't flow through, but it can get into the cavity. But the reason I don't want to do it as a whole Norman Rockwell bird anymore is because if you spatchcock it or butterfly it, cut the backbone out, you can open it up and lay it flat. Splay it out. And that allows you to brown both sides. So now you can get flavor to the interior of the cavity, which if you do it as a whole bird, normally it's going to stay tan. It's not going to brown. And as we all know, brown is beautiful. Brown is flavor. Brown is the Maillard reaction, where heat changes the chemical structure of proteins and amino acids and reducing sugars and makes them into something really tasty and flavorful. So if you open the bird up and lay it flat, you get brown on all sides. Something else happens. It cooks faster because it's not as thick. And because it cooks faster, you have less moisture loss. And we all know that overcooked turkey breast is about the same as particle board. It's just bone dry. And one of the reasons is we have to cook it to 160. USDA says 165. But we got to cook it to 160 to make it safe. And you do want to do that. Little break here. Those of you who heard that, you probably know that often by my side in these events is Reese, the wonder dog, the leader dog for the blind dropout. Well, Reese passed away a couple of months ago at age 12. We have, as a hobby, been training leader dogs for the blind for years. We've done 7 of them. 5 of them are out there dragging blind people around. Reese flunked out. She was a scaredy cat. She was afraid of garbage bags and other stuff. And if you're going to be a guide dog, you cannot be afraid of anything. And unfortunately, she just didn't make it as a guide dog, which meant that we had this wonderful golden retriever for 12 years. She died, but she's been recently replaced by Sandy, who was just making the racket in the background. Sandy is a yellow Labrador retriever, whom we trained for leader dog for the blind. The smartest dog I've ever seen. We've had 12 dogs. Incredible. This dog is so smart, and she would have been a great leader dog. And we sent her back to the school after a year of training, where she was going to get graduate level training and go out with a blind person. And she got a skin disease. And they just said, we can't give a blind person a dog with a skin disease. So they gave her back to us. Well, guess what? After a month back here, skin disease went away. It's never cropped up. We've had her for about 6 months, and we've got this marvelous yellow lab who is a noisy little dinkins. She's not quite 2 years old yet. And that was her that you just heard barking and coming down the stairs and squeaking on our toy. If you know anything about labs, you know they always have a toy in their mouth. So in any case, Reese won't be with us anymore, but we now have Sandy. And Reese used to wander in and out of these videos. We got a little different camera here, and we'll get that all straightened out. But in any case, long story short, back to the turkey story. I now break the turkey down. I don't even spatchcock it anymore. I break it down into 2 breast lobes, boneless, 2 legs, thigh and drumstick together, and 2 wings separate. And that way I can cook each one to the optimum temperature, because breast tends to be best at around 155 to 160. Thighs tend to be best around 170 to 175. And wings, well, they're all about the skin. You don't have to worry about the interior. That's going to cook through. So I can now put them on in sequence. I can take the bird whole, remove the 2 breast lobes off the rib cage, pound them so they're flat, so they cook evenly, put the breasts and the thighs on together. Actually, I put the thighs on a little earlier because they want to cook a little higher. But when I pound them, they're almost the same thickness as the thighs. Cook everything to optimum temperature, and away we go. And it's fantastic. And no, I don't have that beautiful Norman Rockwell bird to present. But I have really tender, juicy chicken with crispy skin. And I cook it around 325. Lately I've been doing it on my pellet smoker, because pellet smokers produce a really gentle smoke. They're not like your classic Texas smoker that cooks with logs, that gives it a really intense, powerful, smoky flavor. It's a gentle, that's the complaint people have about pellet smokers, is that the smoke flavor is mild. And that's perfect for turkey. So I break it down, pound the breast flat, smoke it on a pellet smoker. It's done fast, it's tender and it's juicy, and everybody has a great piece of meat. So that's my technique this year. Let's take a look at some of my suggestions for you on how you might want to cook your turkey if you don't want to do it my way. Number 1, don't take a risk on Thanksgiving dinner. If this is your first year cooking the turkey, or the first time you're doing it on the grill or the smoker, do one now. Don't wait till the last minute when Thanksgiving dinner is around and you're on show. Everybody's watching you. Don't take a risk of embarrassing yourself. You probably won't embarrass yourself. Especially if you go to AmazingRibs.com and read my ultimate turkey recipe. I've got everything I know about turkey there. In fact, I have an ebook that I did on turkey. You can buy it on Amazon or Apple for $3.99, or if you're a member of our Pitmaster Club, you get it for free. But it has just a ton of information about turkey, everything from shopping to thawing to frosting and cooking. But if you've not done one before, do one now. Get it out of the way. Hey, turkey, you'll always find use for it. Number 2, let the flavor shine. I've heard of people doing all kinds of goofy stuff like injecting it with Dr. Pepper and oh my goodness. Turkey is a very mild meat. It doesn't have a lot of flavor. But if you don't overcook it, it has a nice flavor. Let the flavor shine. Don't go crazy with the injections. But if you just think it's too mild for you and you want to amp it up a notch, here's a trick. Butterball it. Butterball it means inject butter into the breast. You don't have to inject the thighs and the legs. They have more fat. They don't need any help. They're just fine. Butterballing the breasts, though, works. The problem is, if you melt butter and inject it into cold turkey breasts, it's going to freeze up, seize up. It's going to clog up your injector. So what you do is you start cooking it, and when the meat gets warm, then you can inject it and it won't melt the butter. And the butter will give it a wonderful, rich, fatty flavor. Another thing to do is I think poultry, chicken and turkey, are best with an herb rub. Now, a lot of people like your classic barbecue rubs, which are garlic and paprika and onion powder and all that good stuff. But I tell you, I prefer parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Yeah, that's it. You heard it, Simon and Garfunkel. The recipe for my Simon and Garfunkel rub is on AmazingRibs.com. It really works. It's really nice. It's very French, if you will. It's similar to your classic French poultry rub. Or, last year we put some of our rubs in bottles. And this is very similar to Simon Garfunkel, not quite the same. Couldn't do it exactly the same, could I? But there it is right there. Another tip. A lot of people like to brine their turkeys, and that's really good advice. But you need to read the label, because a lot of manufacturers now, or slaughterhouses, inject the birds themselves. And if it says enhanced or brine, read that label. If it's been injected, which the chances are it has, almost all turkeys now are, go easy on the brine. You don't need a lot more salt. It's already salted. You can oversalt it. But if you want to salt it, and you should consider getting some salt down in there, because salt, as you know, I've talked about it, it's the magic rock. It does amplifies the flavor and helps hold on to moisture. You can dry brine it. You can just sprinkle it with salt the night before, and it will penetrate all by itself. You don't have to get a beer cooler and fill it with apple juice and salt and pepper and garlic. None of that stuff can penetrate. It can't get past the surface. Only the salt can get in. This is just a matter of physics and chemistry. The molecules are too large. They'll get into the skin and maybe the cracks and crevices. But if you dig into that breast and you taste the core of that breast, you will not taste the garlic or the apple cider or the pepper. It just can't get in there. But salt can, so you want to get salt on it. Okay? Don't trust the pop-up thermometer. It's set to go off at around 170 because the manufacturers are worried that you're going to sue them if you get sick. So it's set to go off at a temperature where there's absolutely zero risk, and it's too high. 165 is what USDA says is safe, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that determination, and 160 is fine. If you want 155, and it'll go up 5 degrees to 160, Don't overcook that bird. Don't trust the pop-up thermometer. If you don't have a good digital thermometer, go get one now. On AmazingRibs.com, we have an electrical engineer who tests thermometers, and he recommends them. We don't sell any of them. We don't sell anything. You can go by his recommendations. You can order one. It's a little late to be ordering online, but, you know, Amazon will deliver quickly. Or go to your grocery store, and when you see one, check it against our database. Make sure it's a good one. But you can get a really good digital thermometer for under $30. In fact, one or two of our top-rated ones are in the $20 range. All right, we talked about the cavity. Don't put the stuffing in the cavity. And here's a fun idea. On the website, I have a recipe for what I call stuffings or muffins. They're stuffing muffins. Basically, you make your regular old stuffing mix, and you need to add a little egg to it so it's a binder, and cook them in muffin pans. So everybody gets a muffin made out of stuffing, a stuffing muffin. And this is really cool because the top is the crusty part, and that's the part everybody wants. Well, if you stick it in the bird, you just got a little bit of crusty part. If you do it in a pan, you got a little bit of crusty part. But if you make a stuffing muffin, everybody gets a muffin top. Just like Seinfeld. Or Elaine. So stuffing muffins is a really cool idea. Go check out the recipe and the technique on AmazingRibs.com. But on the other hand, if you're not putting the stuffing in there, I've heard of people putting onions in there and oranges and stuff. Oh, come on. It just has no effect. I mean, an onion does put out aromas, but it's measured in parts per billion. It's not going to impact the flavor of the meat. Even if you put herbs and spices and all that neat stuff, it's just not going to affect the meat. It's not. I mean, this is some sort of crazy dream world. Now, one other trick. I got a couple more tricks for you. I love to put a pan underneath the bird, and in that pan, I put celery and carrots and apples and herbs and maybe a bottle of wine or some chicken stock. And what I do is I build a turkey stock underneath the bird. Now, it's on the smoker, so the juices that drip off are falling in there, and the pan is getting smoke flavor also. And when you do this, you get a turkey stock base. You can use it as a base for a roux. You can make your classic gravy with adding flour if you want. I don't bother adding the flour because flour just makes it thick and pasty, and it sits on top of the meat. This stuff is thin and rich and full of flavor, and if you pour it over breast meat, it goes right in. It soaks right in. So this is a great technique. Again, I have this on the website. And another thing, when you're going to put the bird above this pan, if you're on the grill, you put the bird on the grill grate, you put the pan underneath the grill grate. What happens is the warm air circulates all around the bird, and it will brown the skin on the bottom as well as on the top. If you have one of those Calphalon $300 roasting pans with a high side and a V-shaped rack, and you put the bird in it, what happens to the bottom? It's tan and wet and soft when it comes out. And that's because the heat can't get past the walls of the pan. And even if it does get in there, the bird's sitting above a wet base. So that wet base is going to hit 212 and not go any higher. The bottom of the bird may not get above 250. Yet it may be 300 or 350 above the top of the bird. So it's cooking unevenly. And that's why you get the beautiful golden top and the tan, soggy bottom. Lift the bird above the pan. If you're cooking in your oven indoors, put it on a rack in the middle and put the pan on the bottom. And let the bird drip into it. Now you'll have to scrub the bloody rack, but you can get it clean. And now you're going to have a bird that's cooked properly all around. And don't cook too hot. I've seen recipes that say 500 degrees or something. Oh, for crying out loud. Basic rule number one, protein shrinks when it's under heat. It doesn't like heat. It gets its undies in a bunch, and then it squeezes out the juices. 325. That's your magic number. 325. It takes longer, but it's going to be more juicy. It keeps more juice in. The proteins don't shrink. The muscle fibers don't shrink. So cook at 325 and try not to get much lower. Now, normally I like smoking at 225, but at 320, you need 325 to render the fat in the skin. And don't baste. You want crispy skin. You want crunchy skin. If you baste the bird, you're just making it wet. You're not going to get crispy skin. So those are my tips for turkey. And I know I rambled on longer than I usually do at the opening of one of these things, but I wanted to get you all primed up and ready for your Thanksgiving cook. And let's take a look at your questions. And they don't have to be turkey. Any questions you got. Now I'm working on a slightly. My camera died. I used to have my camera over here. I got two monitors. I used to have my camera over here, and now I'm using the built-in camera, and it's smaller, and I can't see your questions very well. Let's see if I can get them straight. Okay, I see a number of familiar names and faces. Thanks for coming by, guys. Mark Schlesinger again. Hello, Mark, from Sonoma wine country. Oh, my goodness. Kern Belton from Trinidad and Tobago. What a pleasure. Mark is saying hello to Sandy. What a guy. Vicky's been using Simon & Garfunkel rub for years. My mother-in-law's favorite. Hey, got to keep the mother-in-law happy, huh? Hello from Wisconsin. Can I cut everything in your broth gravy recipe in half? Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's this weird idea that when you scale up and down, you've got to change proportions, and that's usually not the case. If you double something, you can double it. If you half something, you can half it. There are some weird cases where the proportions, particularly if you're curing, if you're doing things like corned beef or bacon, which uses curing salts, then the ratios are very particular, and we have a calculator for them on our website. But in general, yeah, you can just double or halve, no problem. And in fact, we redid the website about a year ago, and now you can enter how many portions, or you can do proportional variations. I see somebody named Harry Stewart in there, and I'm wondering, is that you, Harry, from California, the maestro, the barbecue restaurateur, whom I've lost track of and tried to send a message to? And if that's you, Harry, will you send me an email? I'm Meathead at AmazingRibs.com. I'd love to touch base with you again, Harry. If it's not you, Harry, well, whoever Harry Stewart you are, it's good to have you here. Yeah, Droid Insanity saying, I didn't know I have a Twitch channel. I do have a Twitch channel. I don't go there much. It's just that I have this cool program that lets me simulcast to Twitch. And usually the visitors from Twitch are aggravating. It's nice to know you're a nice person, though. Okay, Hassler Hayes. Not sure I understand your question. What food cooks better on a direct heat smoker, such as an ugly drum, versus an indirect heat smoker, such as a Kamado, in your view? Ooh, there's some issues with the question. I think all smokers should be cooking indirect. That is, all right, probably you guys understand this, but forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but I want to make sure I don't leave behind somebody who's new to the game. there's three different kinds of energy on a grill. And one of them is conduction. When you lay the food on top of a hot piece of metal, that hot piece of metal heats up and transmits that energy really hot and fast, and that's why you get grill marks. It's intense, concentrated heat, conduction, and it's the most concentrated heat there is. So if you put a cast iron pan in there and you put the meat on the cast iron pan, it's going to sear very quickly. Next most is infrared radiation, and you get infrared radiation when you put the meat directly above glowing coals or flame. It's just like standing in the sun. You get a lot, everybody knows you get ultraviolet radiation in the sun, but most of what you feel when you stand in the sun is infrared radiation. Ultraviolet's a very small part of that wavelength. You get a lot of infrared. That's the heat. That's the stuff that burns the back of your neck. Then you step into the shade, and now you're getting convection airflow. The air that's all around outside that's being heated by the sun flows into the shade. And all air flows and all oil flows and water flows by convection. A convection oven is just an oven that has a fan to make things move around. So convection airflow is just hot air, and it's not very good at conducting. So if you've got a grill and you divide it into two zones, and I strongly recommend all grilling be done in a two-zone setup, that you have a hot infrared side where there's flame or coals, and a cool or shady indirect side where warm air flows. You now have control over temperature, and cooking is all about temperature control. And you're going to do most of your cooking on the cooler side where it's not too hot to shrink the proteins, shrink the muscle fibers, and squeeze out the juices. But when you want to sear it, when you want to get a good dark skin on that chicken or turkey, when you want to get a really good dark sear on a steak, then you put it over the infrared. You can't sear a steak in an oven because it's cooking with convection airflow. You can only sear a steak under a broiler or in a cast iron pan or on a grill over a hot flame. You need infrared to sear. Now, back to your question, Hayes. What food cooks better on a direct heat smoker? Most smokers are not direct heat. Most smokers are indirect heat, where you get the smoke and the flame off to the side or deep down below, and you're not sitting directly over flame or coals. Those flame or coals are off to the side. So that's indirect heat. So most smokers are not direct heat. Now, you mentioned the Kamado. Now, all right, you mentioned UDS, the ugly drum. And yes, those are smokers where you're cooking high above the coals. So you are, in fact, above coals. But you're high above, so the energy is not all that concentrated. And I'm not going to get deep into a law of physics called the inverse square law. But the inverse square law basically says that as you move away from radiation source or energy source or heat source, the temperature drops off really fast. So, long story short, I'm not a huge fan of round Kamados because you can't set them up easily into two zones. And I think two-zone cooking is essential. I love drum smokers, but when you hang ribs or a bird down in there, often you're getting very close to the heat source, and you run into a risk of burning. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but if I haven't, drop me an email or go to theamazingribs.com, and there's a comment section on every single page, and post your question there where my answer can be shared with everyone. Jim Cheshire, what do you think about spatchcocking? I mentioned it earlier. I like spatchcocking because it makes the bird cook faster. You brown all sides, and you lose less moisture. But I like, even better than spatchcocking, to break it down into parts where I can cook the breasts to their optimum temperature, cook the thighs to their optimum temperature, and those temperatures are not the same. But spatchcocking is certainly better than doing it as a Norman Rockwell bird. And I've written about this at length, and if you got here on time, you would have heard that. Sorry, Scott. Mark Schlesinger, I plan to cook my turkey on a rotisserie on your gas grill. Okay. It has an infrared burner. Tips for getting crispy skin. You haven't had luck with that infrared burner? Oh my. Those infrared burners are serious heat. They should get the skin crispy. Can you control temperature on it? Can you crank it up? I'm shocked to hear that. The problem with rotisserie turkey is that that's a big piece of meat. And unless you have a counterbalance, my rotisserie has actually a weight. It's like on your tires. You balance your tires with little weights so they don't wobble. When you put a turkey or a chicken on a rotisserie, it tends to wobble because it's heavier on one side. So a counterbalance is the better way to go. You can use the rotisserie, but if it's not crisping the skin, I'm puzzled, because those suckers, those rotisserie burners, those infrared burners, it's like a honeycomb made out of ceramic. They put out serious IR. You should crisp. If you can't, then A, I would check to make sure it's working. B, if it's not cranked up full bore, crank it full bore. But be careful, because if you crank it full bore, the minute you put the bird on there, you're going to crisp the skin and then burn it before it cooks through. I personally don't cook on the rotisserie, and I've got a really good rotisserie. I still cook it on the indirect side and just let it sit there and let the air flow all around it. And then, just before I bring it in, I'll move it to the direct side right above the flame and roll it around and sear it on all sides. You might want to do something similar, or if there's any way to get it closer to the burner. Mark, I don't know. Boy, I've just not heard that before. Usually those infrared burners on a rotisserie are nasty hot. All right, so I don't know why yours isn't doing the job. Hello, Scott from Vancouver. And Adam Zepiel, Dan Mancuso. Dan, I think you've been to every one of these dang things since I've been doing them for, 10 years. We got to get together, dude. You know? You've been using the rotisserie on your grill for a few years on Thanksgiving. Been very happy with the results. Okay, my gut instinct is you're not cooking big birds, because those rotisseries put a lot of heat, but they're cool, because here's some more fun physics here. What happens is the bird is rotating in front of a burner, right? And here's an idea for the other guy with the rotisserie question, Mark. I've done this on my rotisserie. I use the rotisserie burner, but I also use the underneath burners. So if you put the underneath burners, you're now putting a lot of convection airflow. When you're using the rotisserie burner, you're getting infrared right on the surface, and that's very concentrated. That's going to get the skin crispy, but you need to get energy down into that breast to cook it through. Now, Dan's been getting success with that, and he's probably learned how to get a bird that's not too big and dial in the right temperature, and make sure it's not too close to that burner, and his burner is probably cooperating with him. But one of the cool things that happens on that rotisserie is the bird. Okay, here's a turkey, and the camera is the burner. Okay, so I'm pointing this turkey at the camera. And now it's getting high heat on this side. And now it's rotating. And as it rotates, the side facing the burner or the camera is getting concentrated heat. But as it rotates away, it's cooling. So it's alternating between hot, cool, hot, cool. And so if you track the temperature, it's what they call a sinusoidal wave. It's a wave that goes, so it goes hot, cool, hot, cool. And that's a really interesting scenario because it helps, it averages the temperature essentially. You get a high heat and then a low heat, a high heat and then a low heat, and the average is what it's experiencing. And it's pretty good at retaining moisture. Okay, Edward Kent from Virginia Beach. Love it down there. Oh, well, he's asking about thoughts on rotisserie. We've been talking about that, so you're tuned right in. Spooky Truth is going to smoke some turkey legs and deep fry my turkey. I am wondering if that post-turkey leg smoking is a good idea to flash fry the legs, I think, not kegs, since I will have the oil there anyway. Okay, let me read that again. You're going to smoke some turkey legs and deep fry the turkey. Okay, deep frying turkey. I've got a whole big article on that. I mean, it's a lot of fun. And boy, you get ultimate crispy skin, and it's really juicy, and it cooks really fast. But just go to YouTube and Google deep fried turkey disasters. And you will see video after video of people doing it in their garage and setting the garage on fire, setting their car on fire. The biggest problem is that the bird is cold and the oil is 375 or more. And when you put that bird in there, and remember, meat is 70-75% water. So now you're putting water into oil, and it comes out of the fridge at 38 degrees, and even if you let it sit on the kitchen counter for an hour or two, it's still cold. It's not going to get to room temperature. It's going to take hours to get to room temperature. So you're putting a cold block of water into 375 oil. So the first thing that happens is it just starts bubbling away like crazy because that water starts coming out of the meat in the form of steam instantly. Whoosh! And unless you've allowed for the displacement, and this is where people, they don't think. They fill up that tub with oil, and the bird pushes the oil up and over the top. And as soon as it comes over the top, it hits that flame, and kablooey, you have a conflagration. So what you should be doing is, before you fill that thing with oil, is you put the bird in the empty pot and fill it with water until the bird is completely submerged. Then you get a magic marker out and you mark the water line. Then you take the bird out, dry it off with paper towels, dump the water out, dry out the fryer, or the bucket. And now you can fill the bucket with oil to the magic marker line. And you know that when you put the bird in, it's not going to overflow. But you've still got to be careful. It's a cold bird in hot oil. And what I do is I get a stepladder. Just a big old A-shaped stepladder. And I put it over the pot. And then I tie a rope to the legs. And it goes up over the stepladder. And I stand back. And I got a picture of this. I stand back 5 or 10 feet. And gently lower the rope and lower the bird in. And lower it gently. Because as soon as it hits that oil, it's going to start blah, 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 blah. And you don't want to be anywhere near there. Because it'll bubble and God forbid you're wearing flip-flops. And don't do it in your garage. So be very, very careful about deep frying. And probably, Spooky Truth, you've done this before. And you know all this. But if you've never done it before and you want to start it, start it. All right, so you're thinking about doing some turkey legs, first smoking them, and then hitting them with the oil. Why not? But if you're going to smoke them, you don't want to cook them all the way through, because when they hit that oil, they're going to cook, and they're going to cook fast. So my instincts are, as you're doing something like a reverse sear, get that smoker down as cool as you can, get the turkey legs in the smoker, get some smoke on them, but don't cook them all the way. Maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes. most, and then take them out and then fry them to crisp the skin. That'll probably work okay. If you want to do smoked turkey legs, I have reverse engineered the famous Disney smoked turkey legs, which are cured first, then smoked. And they're awesome. If you've been to Disney World, you know you've seen people walking around with these big old dinosaur turkey legs. And I know how to do it, and you can too. It's on AmazingRibs.com. It requires a curing agent, but it's pretty easy to do, and it's fun. And Harry Stewart, it is you. Oh, Harry, I remember watching you cook at a National Barbecue Association conference. Took pictures of you doing it, and then you had this restaurant. And please drop me a note, Meathead at AmazingRibs.com, so we can reconnect. And any one of you guys who want to reach out to me, that's how you reach me. Charlie Jones, I have been blocked from going live. I have no clue why. Well, Charlie, you're here. I don't know what your issue is. I don't know what you're talking about. Spooky Truth. Deep fried turkey before, but this is my first year smoking a turkey leg. I'm not curing the leg, Disney style, just brining and smoking. That works. It's really wonderful, and it's a lot of fun. I've been puzzled. I do Thanksgiving at my brother-in-law's house, and there's like 30 people there. And nobody eats the turkey legs? I mean, it used to be, it's the first thing that goes. I don't get it. Everybody's different. Dan says your infrared sears really well. Yeah, it should. Crisps the skins really well. Yeah, okay, so he says he's doing 16 to 18 pound birds, which is relatively small. And that's how you can get away with doing it on a rotisserie. You can't do a big bird. And here's a tip. If you got a big crowd, like 20 or 30, like we do 2 small birds rather than 1 big bird. Remember, here's the theory. The thicker something is, the longer it takes to cook. And the more likely that the outsides of it are going to be overcooked, because that's where all the heat is hitting. And you've got to wait for the heat to penetrate to the center. While the heat is migrating to the center, it's overcooking the exterior, which is why pounding a chicken breast or pounding a turkey breast makes a lot of sense. You now make it thinner so it doesn't take as long for the heat to reach the center. Or do a smaller bird where the breast is less thick. Duh. And a 16-pound bird is not too big. Yeah, Dan's saying he's using the outside burners. Yeah, sure, that makes a lot of sense, Dan. Combine the outside burners and rotisserie. You got to fiddle with it, and this is where I was saying the very first tip is practice before you Thanksgiving dinner so you don't embarrass yourself before the gang. But yeah, if you're going to do rotisserie, you can cook just with the rotisserie burner. But I always found with a big bird like a turkey, that a combination of my underneath burners and my rotisserie burner was the best way. And those and he's saying, he's probably doing something like putting the left burner and the right burner on and leaving the center burner off, or front and rear, one of those things, and then the rotisserie. So you're getting that combination, and that makes an awful lot of sense. AJ, love my book. Hey AJ, I have been chained to my keyboard for months. I have forgotten how to drive. I have not been out at all for months because I'm working on a new book for you. I'm really proud of it too. I'm doing some beautiful photography too. I don't know if many of you know this, but I actually did my master's in photography. And I've really decided I'm going to amp up my photography. Scott Miller, option on cheesecloth. What about adding baking powder to the dry brine? Been using it on chicken for really nice skin. Okay, the cheesecloth routine is something that I don't see the need for it. I mean, I've never had a problem with it. There, that I mentioned that New York Times article earlier, where I mean, Martha Stewart was putting her turkey in a T-shirt. Um, you know, um, um, I'm just thinking about T-shirts and what they say, and if you put a T-shirt with a a slightly naughty thing written on it, will it show up on the turkey? I don't know. I don't get the T-shirt, the cheesecloth. I don't know why you would do that. I mean, if it's wet, it's going to get the skin wet, and it's also going to block infrared. It's going to keep it from getting crispy. If it's wet, it's going to cool it. Cooling it just slows down the cooking. So I don't get that. Now, baking powder is a technique that a lot of us use on chicken and other things, because baking powder lowers the pH, and it helps with browning. But you got to be careful. If you use too much of it, it can make it bitter. So you go really easy. But I've not found a need for that on most chicken or most turkey, at least on the grill. Now, on an indoor oven, maybe. But on the grill, I have no trouble getting skin dark and crispy. Usually I use reverse sear for chicken, which is to say I start it on the indirect side, in the shade, away from the direct infrared energy. We talked about this earlier. If you missed that part of the talk, this tape, the recording of this session will be available on Facebook and YouTube. But you start with a 2-zone system, and you start in the indirect side. You gently warm the meat so it's cooked through, and you don't have overcooked outside parts, but it hasn't browned and tanned. And before it's finished cooking, if you're going up to 160, then around 150, you take it and you move it over to the direct infrared radiant side, and you pound it with lots of energy, and you crisp the skin, and it works beautifully. Matt's asking if the sugar doesn't penetrate, and it doesn't. Was it the Disney leg cured? Yeah, the sugar isn't penetrating, and I don't know how much sugar is involved in that Disney leg. What is curing it is sodium nitrite. That's the cure. That's it's sodium nitrite is a type of salt that will penetrate, that turns meat pink. That's why your ham is pink. Hot dogs are pink. Corned beef is pink. Bacon is pink. They've all been treated with sodium nitrite and or sodium nitrate, which are sodium salts. And so regular table salt is sodium chloride. This is sodium nitrite. And it penetrates, and it turns the meat pink and gives it almost a ham-like flavor. I'm sure there's some sugar involved, but it's not penetrating. It's going to be just on the surface. Now, you may think it's inside. When you bite into it, it's on the surface. It gets on your tongue, and you think it's inside. But if you cut one open and take a core sample, there's no sugar in there. I guarantee it. Spooky Truth has a 14-inch Weber Smoky Mountain and a ThermoWorks smoke thermometer. Nice machine. Should I pop out the thermometer that came with the Weber Smoky Mountain and use the probe on the smoke instead? Yeah, dial thermometers are what they call bimetal thermometers. Now, I don't know if you can see my hands here, but you got two types of metal, and they expand at different rates. And so as one metal heats up, it expands faster than the other metal, and that turns the dial. Okay? This is a technology that was invented in the 1800s, and it worked pretty good. But those dial thermometers are best known as indicators, not thermometers. They're not accurate. And I have a page on the website where customers, readers have been sending me pictures of a digital thermometer next to their dial thermometer readout. And you can see differences of like 50 degrees. You've got a really good device, the ThermoWorks Smoke, which is capable of more than one probe. So you pull that dial thermometer out, put the probe from one of your ThermoWorks Smoke. Now beware, the temperature in the dome is different than the temperature of the meat. It's 6 inches above the meat. hot air rises. Also, your vents are there. So, unless you plan to eat the dome, you don't care what the temperature in the dome is. What's much more important, you pull that thermometer out and plug up the hole altogether. What's much more important is use your ThermoWorks Smoke, which has a probe on a cable. So you now can put your probe right next to the meat on the cooking surface. Now the probe is feeling exactly the same temperature that the meat is feeling. So now you're measuring the meat's hot air exposure. It doesn't matter what the temperature in the dome is. So use the probe next to the meat. Get it an inch or two away because there's a cold air bubble around the meat. Taking the meat out of the fridge at 38 degrees, put it in that oven. It's cooking at 225 or 325. You got a big differential between 38 and, well, we'll say turkey, 325. Big differential between those two temperatures. And that turkey is cold, so there's a cold air bubble. So get that probe a couple of inches away from the meat, but near the meat. Clip it onto the grate. Your probe should come with a little clip that goes on the grate. Hold on. This is my thermometer box. Can you believe it? And this isn't all of them. All right, let's get this out of the way here. Here it is. There's your thermometer, ThermoWorks Smoke. See? You got this cable. And you have room for 2 cables. So you can put one in the bird and clip one they come with clips. And if you guys don't have one of these, this device is a high-end, fairly expensive one. But you can get one for like 40 bucks. It does the same thing. And so here's the clip. Can you see the clip? And that clip goes on the grate, cooking grate, and it'll hold it just about an inch above the cooking grate right next to the bird. And that's what you want to do. So I would just pull out that you can leave it in there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just not doing you any damn good. Okay. Oops, things have scrolled away here. Let me get back caught up. I'm reading your... I can get the questions from Facebook and YouTube, and it looks like Twitch as well. So I'm reading your questions. I got them all coming in. I got this nifty program called Ecamm Live. It runs only on a Mac, but by golly, it's fun. Or it's good for this sort of thing. Okay. All right, I'm getting back to... Okay, where's some of the... Okay, now I'm up to speed. Cat Steele, just watched an Aaron Franklin turkey cook. He rubs 2 pounds of butter on it when it hits 135 and then wraps it in foil to finish. That's a ton of butter. Yeah, and hey, Aaron Franklin is Barbecue Hall of Famer. So am I. Aaron Franklin runs arguably the best barbecue restaurant in Texas, maybe in the country. Aaron Franklin knows a lot of what he's doing. But let's remember, oil and water don't mix. Butter is mostly oil. Now, there is some water in butter. That's not mixed. It's an emulsion. But you can rub that butter all over that baby, and it is not penetrating the meat. It cannot go into the meat. Under any circumstances on this planet or any other planet in the solar system will butter penetrate meat. Now, it'll moisten the surface and flavor it somewhat, but it's a surface treatment only. And if he's putting it on the skin and wrapping it in foil, he's got to take that foil off at some time and expose it to high heat. Otherwise, that skin is going to be rubber. So I don't know for sure what he's doing. Cats, if you think of it, send me a copy or a link to that video so I can watch it. And then I'm going to write him a letter. No, I do know how to reach him, but it just doesn't sound right. Now, a lot of people put butter under the skin. Because remember, the skin it's not all fat, but it's mostly fat. And so, penetrating that skin ain't easy either. But a lot of people will lift up the skin and rub underneath. Now, that butter will flavor the meat and the skin, but it's not going in. Yeah, Hillette Jackie has got a good technique. Great results with her pellet smoker. Doing it on the smoker for an hour and then cranking the temperature up to 325. And when you do that, then you're going to get crispy skin. So I'm guessing you're doing it at a lower temp just to get pellet smokers make more smoke at low temp. They're very efficient burners. And as you get higher in temperature, they make less smoke. So if you start your pellet smoker at a low temp, you're going to get more smoky flavor. But to get crispy skin, you need to be at least 325 or higher. So what she's doing, and that makes perfect sense, is she's starting it at a lower temp, getting some smoke flavor on it, and an hour is all it needs. And then cranked it up. And it's still giving smoke, but not a lot. But at the higher temp, it's crisping the skin. And that makes a lot of sense. What I've done on some occasions is, especially if I find that people are sitting at the dinner table waiting, is I'll smoke it for an hour or two and get it close to finish temp. And then I'll move over to my gas grill and my gas grill has infrared burners. And I'll fire up those infrared burners and just crisp the skin and finish it there. Boom, off we go. And it tastes marvelous. Or you move it indoors and pop it in the oven. Yeah, AJ is saying that in my book and elsewhere, I point out that meat doesn't need to rest to keep the juices. Others, including various test kitchens, continue to include resting meat. Well, let me just clarify. I don't say it doesn't work. I question whether it works. I don't know for sure whether resting meat works. It is one of these shibboleths, these forever believed to be true, and I have never seen a research paper, and there's meat science people in this world who do research, real research, controlled research, in labs. I have never seen a research paper that says that resting meat makes a difference. Now, we've done kitchen research, which is not real science, but it comes close. And we have seen that if you take hot meat out of the grill and slice into it, or if you let it rest 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we've done all this, there is slightly more moisture loss if you slice into it immediately. But it's a very small amount. And after 5 minutes, the difference is almost negligible. Now, if you take that meat, turkey, off the smoker or the grill, okay, now you're taking it out of the heat. You're putting it in a pan. You're marching it into the kitchen. You're going to get the knife and the fork, and it's going to be 3 or 4 minutes before you start carving in the first place. And what happens to that juice? There's going to be juice. What happens to it? You collect it in the pan. And what do you do with that juice? You either throw it in the gravy or pour it over the meat. Net loss? 0. What's the big deal? The other thing is and by the way, I am probably the only person on earth who says, I don't understand why we're supposed to rest meat. I think every other cook on earth, every other chef on earth says, rest your meat, rest your meat, rest your meat. And that's because Their instructor in culinary school said, rest your meat, rest your meat, rest your meat. And that's because the instructor read it in a book by a Frenchman who said, rest your meat, rest your meat, rest your meat. I mean, even Anthony Bourdain, whom I worship, says you have to rest your meat. I don't know why. And I'm asking it. So I don't say you don't have to. I'm asking why. And I have tried to prove it. I mean, let's talk about a steak. You cut into that steak, the juices run out on the plate. What do? You stab a piece of meat with your fork and you mop up the juices. It goes right back into the meat. Net loss? 0. So what's the big deal? And I say people want to see hot food on their plate. They don't want it sitting around. And goodness gracious, don't tent your turkey with aluminum foil. Now you're steaming the skin. Take that turkey off the grill, take that steak off the grill, and get it on the table while it's hot. Because you know what makes things moist? What is really important for moisture? Saliva. Yeah. When things are hot and sizzling and steaming on the plate, your mouth starts watering. And that makes food taste juicy. It's really important. I think let's make mouths water. So I don't mess with this resting stuff. Now, I just happened to write a letter to Texas A&M, which has one of the great meat science departments. And Professor Lavelle, if you're listening, you got to answer my email. I want to see research done on this. I want to know. I don't know. I haven't seen it. And people keep saying that. You say don't rest. I don't say don't rest. I do say I don't know why we rest or why people rest. And I don't rest. But I don't say don't rest. I just want to make that clear. And I know it's a subtle difference, but I want to know. I want to know. I'm a data guy. If you've read my books or gone on the website, you know I like to see research. Okay. Joseph Kinsella. What a great name Kinsella is. Great bit of history around that name. Gonna spatchcock a turkey. Whole bird bought from a farm. In a previous cook, I cut the spine out using hand shears. Yeah. But it was slightly difficult. Yeah. The backbone, which is what you cut out to spatchcock, is attached to the rib cage. And on large birds in particular, that connection is pretty thick. You need really heavy-duty shears. In fact, one year I went down into the basement and got my wire cutters. But I've got some really good. I recommend a pair on my website. I think they're, I forget the brand. But I've got a really good pair on my website recommended. And cutting through those rib bones ain't easy. And in fact, tell you a funny anecdote. Harry Connick Jr. had a TV show for a number of years, a daytime talk show. And Harry's a barbecue fanatic, and he and I have become friends over the years. And he's asked me for advice, and I helped him design a barbecue pit on a trailer because he likes to travel around. And he had me on his show, and we did a turkey. We did 2 turkeys. And I was showing him how to spatchcock it. And I was having trouble cutting through, and I'm on live TV. I'm having trouble cutting through those rib bones. And Harry said, and there's a video of this. You can't tell by watching the video. But Harry has extrasensory, and he sensed, and he reached over and grabbed the scissors. And of course, he's a pianist, and he's got big hands. He's bigger than I am. And he just went right on through them. It was great. He saved my ass on national TV. So you're asking, Joseph, if the farm would spatchcock for you. They might. I mean, a lot of butchers are just happy to please. You might just ask, if you can't get a really good pair of shears that will cut through them. Now, if you're going to spatchcock, typically we go right along the spine. And if you look at their ribs, the ribs actually get thick, excuse me, near the spine. Come out a ½ inch. And the ribs are thinner there. You're going to be cutting off a little more than you normally would. But hey, you take that spine and you throw it in the pan. I was talking earlier, I don't know if you were here when I was talking about how to make the stock in the pan under the bird. Throw that spine in the pan and use it for stock. So if you cut a little extra off, not the end of the world, that may help you get away from the spine by a ½ inch to an inch and cut through where the bone is thinner. If not, get out the Sawzall. I mean, you go to a butcher shop, they got bandsaws. I mean, I'm not kidding. If you've ever, if you have a real butcher shop nearby, I tell people, knowing your butcher is better than knowing your stockbroker. Get to know your butcher and ask them if you can come in the back and see. They got a bandsaw. Man, that baby, and they cut through frozen meat with those things. So, quite possibly, the guy who sells you the live turkey or the fresh cut turkey will do the spatchcocking for you. Okay. Chris P. is asking for thoughts on injecting butter into turkey breast. Chris, here's a really good tip. We started at 7:30, and I talked about this earlier, so go watch the video replay. No, the tip is really simple. You can't inject melted butter into cold turkey breast. Start cooking it as the turkey breast warms up, then you can inject. Okay, so I'm back to Hallie, who did the pellet smoker first, and then she says pellet smoking around 180. Yeah, you just got to be careful. That's a risky low temperature, but you're finishing at a higher temp, so no big deal. Yeah, and Joseph, Joseph is back the asking how to spatchcock. If you're not hung up on cooking the bird whole, you're going to get a better tasting piece of meat if you break it down into parts. And I do that now every year. I gave up on spatchcocking and whole bird. And I'm able to get the breast at optimum temp, the thigh at optimum temp. And when I'm done, I have this massive carcass. And I take the breast off the rib cage. And you probably guys have seen this done, but what you do is this is the first thing you do when you've got the bird. All right, this is how you carve the bird, whether it's raw or cooked. You got this whole bird, you stand it so that the breasts are up and the wings are down. And you start by cutting, think of a bird like a human. Those legs have a crotch where they attach to the main body, and the wings are like the arms, and they attach at the shoulders. So there's 4 main joints. If you start in the crotch, where there's like a hammock of skin that connects the thigh to the main body, and if you just cut through that skin with your knife, the thigh and the drumstick kind of fall aside, and if you push down, you can see the hip joint. And it's a ball and socket, just like your hip joint. You can get into that ball and socket with your blade and separate the leg. Boom, it's instant. Same thing on the other leg. So now you've got both legs off. That's the dark meat. You want to shoot for 170 for the dark meat. Now, you've got the breasts. There's what they call a keel bone, and that runs right down the center of the bird, right down the breast. And they call it keel bone because it looks kind of like the keel of a boat. And it comes right up under the skin. And you put your blade as close to the center as you can, and it's going to slide on one side or the other of the keel bone. And I like to use a filleting knife with a flexible blade for this this step. And I tell you what my favorite knife for this project is. A $20 Rapala filleting blade that I buy at the sporting goods store. I have all the fancy German and Japanese and Damascus blades anyone would ever want. My $20 Rapala. It's wicked sharp. It's really thin. And if it ever gets dull and I can't sharpen it anymore, I just throw the damn thing away and go out and buy another $20 blade. So you're going to put this filleting knife and you're going to kind of saw along that keel bone until you hit the rib cage. And their rib cage, just like yours, it bows. And when you hit that rib cage, just kind of keep sawing and the blade will slide along the rib bones. And keep sliding that blade along the rib bones. Keep it right on the rib bones. And when you get to the bottom, you will have a lobe of pure white meat, breast meat. And it comes right off. Do the same thing on the other side. Now you got the wings. And they're tricky because their joint, that's the shoulder joint. Again, another ball and socket. It's kind of deep into the meat. But once you've got the breasts off, you can get in there and you can kind of wiggle that wing back and forth and poke around in there with your knife, and you'll find that that ball and socket cut right between the ball and socket. Now your wings are off. Now I usually cut the tips of the wings off. Now I know a lot of people like to gnaw on them, but I cut them off and they go in the stock. And that leaves the other two. A wing has three parts: the tip, the wingette, and the drumette. The drumette is like a little drumstick. And I leave those two together and I cook those two together. And the tips go in the stock. Now you've got this carcass. And there's still meat on there. And there's still flavor on there. And the underside's got skin on it. Now, deep underneath that underside, if you feel around about middle of the bird, you'll find two little pieces of meat that they call the oysters. And because they're about the size of an oyster. And they're really good, really tender, really juicy. And usually, if you're cooking the whole bird or spatchcocking, I make sure that those never make it to the table. That's chef's treat. But you can pop those out and you can grill those off, and they're done in like 20 minutes. And while you're cooking away, that's chef's treat. Then the rest of that carcass, I break down. Crack them up, beat them up with my hands, and I get the kitchen shears and my Chinese cleaver and just smash the heck out of it and everything. And that goes in a big old pot, or it goes in that pan that I talked about that goes under the bird. With the wingtips, with the back, all the carcass goes under there, along with carrots, celery, onions, apple, a bottle of white wine, some herbs, and now I'm building a stock underneath the animal, underneath the prime pieces. So I've got two breast lobes, which I've pounded flat. I've got the leg and thigh combo. I got the wings, and underneath that, I'm making awesome gravy. All this is explained on AmazingRibs.com, or if you want, go to Amazon and buy the ebook for $3.99, or take the Pitmaster Club 30-day free trial, and you can download it for free. And then you'll want to be a member of the Pitmaster Club on AmazingRibs.com. Okay. Okay, Scott. Scott says he lets it rest because it's too hot to carve right off the grill. Well, you don't have to handle it, man. You got one of these carving forks, don't you? Or just any old fork. But you're right. It is pretty darn hot. So, yeah, you're right. Exactly. I mean, it's resting. Just don't worry about it. Rob wants to know if I'm doing any, Rob Gibson wants to know if I'm doing any appearances or book signings soon. No. I wish I could get out. First of all, I hibernated during COVID. You know, 73, and I just didn't want to take any risks. And besides, the past 4 or 5 months, do yourself a favor. If anybody asks you to write a cookbook, run for the hills. I did a cookbook before, which I was able to do sort of on the side, and now I'm doing another one, and I'm on a deadline. And I just keep it's just a lot of work. It's torture. So I'm not going anywhere until I finish the book, which I'm finishing the manuscript March 1st, and I'm finishing photography in June. And then I'm probably going to take a couple of weeks of that. What's that word? Vacation. I forgot the word. And then the book will be out in spring 24. And I know I've been promising it for years, but now I'm on deadline, so it's actually going to happen. So in spring 24, I'll be out on the road again. Where are you? Rob, tell me where you are, and maybe we can hook up. Ryan Leal, is it okay to sear your rubs? Will it not burn the dried herbs? Yeah, that's an issue. The turkey rub is a lot of herbs, and it will burn if you hit them with high heat for too long. I've done it with chicken. I've done a reverse sear on chicken, which is I started on the indirect side and then move it over, and there's enough fat in the skin to keep the rub from burning, and it works fine. They're really good. But if you tried to do it like a steak, it would immolate them. But there is a red meat rub here, and it loves the heat. I've blasted it with heat, and it doesn't harm it. It absolutely loves high heat. So, okay, here's a good one. Walkabout Tyler says he bought a small pruning shear for the muffin tin thighs that is dedicated to barbecue and it works great for turkey. I'm not sure what you mean by muffin tin thighs, but yeah, pruning shears. They're really sturdy. They're meant to cut through wood, and brand new ones. You use them only for food, and boy, they will just make fast work of breaking down a bird. Absolutely, good thinking. Oh, you're in Round Lake, Rob. I'm in Brookfield. I'm in Illinois. I'm a neighbor. I mean, you're a little further north than me, but and as with my last book, when it came out, I did several book signings around the Chicago area. So make sure you're signed up for my email newsletter on the website, and you'll hear more about when the book comes out and where I am. Dan Mancuso, come to New Jersey for a book signing. I'll do that. I have lots of friends in New Jersey, and of course I'll have to be in New York. Well, I think we've been at this now for an hour and almost hour and a half, and I've hit the bottom of the list of questions, and I think I've just about blurted out all the stuff I can think of that's of any consequence. Let me put my thinking cap on and think if I've omitted something of importance. Actually, give me a second here. Let me pull up a web browser and go to the website and look at my turkey article and scan through that and see if there's something in there that I forgot to. But if you go to AmazingRibs.com, on the homepage, near the top, you'll see a link for the Premier Guide to Thanksgiving done on the grill, and then you'll see the ultimate grilled and smoked turkey recipe. That's my, and it is a long article. It's a tome, but it's got good stuff in it. Let's see. It's got its own bloody table of contents. Handling raw turkey. Now remember, handling raw chicken and poultry is risky. There's a high risk of salmonella and campylobacter, so make sure the food scientists say you should not rinse it. They say when you rinse it, you run the risk of aerosolizing pathogens, and they can land on the clean dishes in your dish drain or on the countertop, and it gets all over the sink. So just unpack it. And I know it may feel slimy, but that stuff goes away. And make sure you wipe everything up carefully. Turkey and chicken juices are almost always contaminated. There's nothing you can do about it. And there's something our government may be able to do about it. They may be able to change some regulations to make the slaughtering and handling better, but just I say treat poultry like kryptonite. If it looks like I'm looking away, I'm looking at my other monitor, seeing if there's stuff that I forgot to mention. Portion size, 10 people by a 20-pound bird. Basically by twice as much as, by 2 pounds per person. A lot of it is bone, so that'll be wasted. There is drip loss, or purge they call it. When you cook, there's moisture evaporates and drips off. And everybody wants to go home with a aluminum foil packet of leftovers. So 10 people, do a 20-pound bird, or 2 10-pound birds, or a 12 and 2 12s, whatever. Just, it's Thanksgiving. Cook more than everybody needs and send people home with leftovers. I mean, hey, turkey sandwiches, turkey pot pie. My wife makes a pot pie every year after Thanksgiving, and oh, it's so wonderful. And I make a turkey sandwich with cranberries on it. Oh, here's a fun idea. This is a recipe from my new book. I take a turkey breast, pound it flat, start it warming, inject it with butter, take the skin off, grill the skin until it gets hard and crispy, and then break it up into bits. Then I take dried cranberries, put them in port wine in a saucepan on the stovetop. That reconstitutes them. They puff up, they fill up with port wine. So they're no longer raisins, they're now semi-raisins. And then I slice the bird and put the cranberry raisins and the flakes, the chips of the skin, turkey skin cracklings on top. And boy, is that ever good. And that makes a great sandwich. In fact, can I do screen sharing on this silly thing? I know I can do screen sharing. Yes, I can. Okay, I'm going to get something. Stand by. There it is. Photo sharing. Smug mug. Okay, I'm getting close. Stand by. There we are. All right, let's see if I can photo share. Ah, beautiful. This is a photo gallery of some of the pictures for the next book. And this is the one I wanted to show you. That's it. That is the butterball turkey breast with cranberry raisins and chicken skin cracklings. There you go. You can see the turkey skin cracklings and the cranberry raisins. Isn't that a nice picture? I'm very proud of that. There's some nice pictures in here. This is a recipe we just cooked. pumpkin pie. Pumpkin soup. Smoked pumpkin soup. Want to see some more pictures? You know what that is. That's beef ribs. How about that guy? Lobster, anyone? These are all pictures from the next book. You can see I've upped my game as a photographer. Oh, can you guess what that is? It's canna butter. It's legal in Illinois. Doesn't surprise any of you that I know a little bit about canna butter, does it? All right, well, that's it. I think we've, let's see if I missed any questions that came in since I hit the bottom of the list earlier. Thank you, Helette. Helette says she loves the first book and waiting for the second. Dan's asking what kind of camera gear. Actually, I have a page on my website. But I'm shooting with an Nikon D750, and this stuff is done, it's called light painting, and I shoot in total dark. The lens is open for 10 to 20 seconds, and the only light comes from a little pen light. It's really quite an extraordinary process. It's almost a dance. It's a lot of fun, and it yields extraordinary results. Actually, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find a little video about the process. Well, okay, I think we're wrapping up here, folks. Thank you very much. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll be back again. Let me just check the calendar and see when we're coming back again, because things keep landing. We're supposed to be the last Thursday of the month, but holidays keep getting the... Yeah, okay, so... nope, wrong one. All right, we'll be back in December on the 29th. So that's the last Thursday. We're back on schedule for the last Thursday. We'll be back for the 29th, and that's beyond Christmas, so we'll not have a chance to talk about Christmas dinner, but you guys can figure it out, and there's a lot of good ideas on the website. I have some really good technique for prime rib, if that's what you serve on Christmas. I do. And lately, I've been sous videing my prime rib, because I have to go over the river and through the woods, and I bring it there fully cooked in a sous vide bath, and then 30 minutes before dinner I go out back, and it's usually freezing ass cold, and I sear it on a gas grill until it's got a great hard crust, and it's beautiful rosy color edge to edge because of the sous vide process. That's a good tip. There's more on prime rib and other Christmas type meals on the website. So thank you very much, and have a happy holiday, and we'll see you end of December. Okay, and don't forget, December is coming. Don't forget to pay your taxes.
That's all for now, folks. Thanks for staying awake, and please visit AmazingRibs.com for the articles, recipes, and reviews mentioned in this chat with the Barbecue Whisperer and Hedonism Evangelist from AmazingRibs.com, the planet's biggest and baddest barbecue and grilling website, Meathead.